Welcome to the debate. Our focus today is, well, the shockwave sent through college football by the Lone Star Showdown. We saw the number 16 Texas Longhorns go into College Station and beat the number 3 Texas A&M Aggies 27-17. And this wasn't just, a typical rivalry win. This completely shattered A&M's undefeated season. It cost them a guaranteed spot in the SEC championship, probably a first-round bye in the CFP, and at the same time, it's vaulted Texas into a legitimate playoff conversation.
If a bit of a long shot.
A long shot, sure. So here's the central question we need to tackle today. Was this Texas victory really driven by superior in-game strategic adjustments and just clutch offensive execution? Or was the result more a function of the structural failures and, frankly, the catastrophic collapse of that highly ranked Texas A&M team under pressure? I'm going to argue that Texas's coaches and players won this game through proactive strategy.
And I have to push back on that. I mean, the idea that this was some kind of Longhorn genius at play, I just don't see it as the main factor. I mean, yes, Texas played well, but the image that's going to stick from this game is the Aggies just completely shooting themselves in the foot in that fourth quarter. When a team ranked number 3 in the country loses like that, you have to look inward first. So I'll be arguing that it was A&M's total failure to maintain defensive integrity combined with just devastating turnovers that really decided this game.
Okay, well, let's start with what I see as strategic brilliance. It really started to show up after a pretty sluggish first half where Texas was trailing 10-3. The adjustment they made wasn't a minor tweak. It was a fundamental shift in their whole offensive identity. We all know Texas with Arch Manning. They want to lean on the passing game, the RPOs. But in that second half, they pivoted entirely to a ground attack that just dominated. They finished with 220 rushing yards.
Right.
220 yards against an A&M defense that came into the game giving up, about 118 per game?
Yeah.
And that success, I think, is directly attributable to the coaching, to them capitalizing on Tre Wisner. It was his first 100-yard performance of the whole season, 155 yards on 19 carries. So when Manning was struggling through the air, and he completed fewer than 50% of his passes, the staff didn't just force it. They ran the ball right down A&M's throat. And that strategic vision was sealed by Manning's own 35-yard touchdown run. That kind of in-game adaptation, to me, is the very definition of a strategic victory.
See, that rushing number is damning, I agree, but I think it indicts A&M's preparation and their discipline, not Texas's, transcendent strategy. We are talking about a top 3 team that suddenly looked like they forgot how to play run defense, and their failure to adjust is what led to the consequences, losing a shot at the CFP bye, losing the SEC berth. Yes, the A&M defense was great in the first half. They held Texas to 3 points, 112 total yards, but then it's like they broke down. They completely abandoned the box control that had defined their whole season. And on top of that, you have all the self-inflicted wounds that no coaching adjustment from the other side could have planned for. The quarterback, Marcel Reed. Fine. His overall numbers look decent. 20 of 32, 180 yards, 71 on the ground. But he made 2 catastrophic errors in the fourth quarter, both interceptions. You just can't do that. Add in the special teams breakdown, the blocked field goal by Ethan Burke early on, and the penalties, and you have a team that actively threw the game away, no matter what plays Texas was calling.
I'll accept that A&M's execution was poor, but I challenge the idea that Texas was just sitting there waiting for mistakes. A&M's defensive integrity didn't just evaporate on its own. It was broken down by specific calculated play calls. Look at how Texas opened the third quarter. That 48-yard run by Wisner. That wasn't just him running hard. Texas came out in heavy sets, multiple tight ends formations they hardly ever show, and that forced A&M's linebackers to get stuck, which isolated the defensive line. That calculated shift is what caused the failure.
It's a compelling point on the personnel, but you're still glossing over the fundamental error. The defense wasn't just out-schemed, they were literally out of position on the biggest plays. That game-sealing 35-yard run by Manning, that play worked because A&M was, and I'm quoting here, out of a gap. They left the A gap, the space right next to the center, completely empty. That is a day 1 failure in your run fits. When you're a top-ranked defense built on discipline and you let a quarterback draw go 35 yards untouched, that proves the collapse was internal. It was systemic.
I see the tactical breakdown, the gap discipline, but I'd argue that Texas's strategy forced A&M to overcommit and lose that discipline. A&M is built on speed, on stopping the deep pass. By suddenly running the ball, 80% of the time in the second half, Texas forced the Aggie D coordinator to stack the box, and that stressed the integrity of the whole unit. It's not that A&M forgot how to play defense. It's that Texas made them play a game they weren't prepared for, and that's how you manufacture those gap failures you're talking about. Even that goal line touchdown by the tight end, Nick Townsend, on the end around. A&M was looking for a crash, for a pass, and they got hit with misdirection they just hadn't prepped for.
Okay, but misdirection does not excuse a top 3 defense from failing to hold their assignments on the goal line. That play where Townsend just walked in for 2 yards, that screams of a team whose structure had just unraveled. And let's not pretend this rushing success was some kind of sustainable brilliance. This was the 105th ranked rushing offense in the country. They succeeded because A&M failed to adjust their run fits. It was a coaching failure amplified by player panic.
Well, if we want to talk about panic, I think we have to shift the conversation to the quarterback battle, because that's where the strategic control of the game really shows.
And this is exactly where the A&M collapse narrative gets its strongest footing. Marcel Reed's 2 fourth-quarter interceptions were the definitive reason A&M lost. I mean, his Heisman campaign is probably over. He was a real contender, but in the biggest moment of the season, he faltered catastrophically. That second pick, the one by Michael Taffy, that came inside the 5-yard line late in the game. That one turnover, right there, it was a physical representation of A&M's inability to deliver under pressure. And what's more, Texas's success against the run, even if you and I disagree on why, it forced Reed into uncomfortable spots. The Aggies couldn't get anything going on the ground in the second half, so Reed was stuck in 3rd and longs, and that exposed him to Texas's edge rush, and that's what led to the pressure and the bad decisions and the turnovers. A&M lost because Reed turned the ball over when the game was right there for the taking.
I see why you're emphasizing Reed's failures, but let's just contrast the 2 quarterbacks in terms of execution under stress. Arch Manning, yes, he was statistically inconsistent, we agree on that, but he demonstrated superior clutch capability when it mattered. He managed the pressure. He extended the play that led to that 54-yard gain to Jack Endries, which set up a score. And his 29-yard touchdown to Ryan Wingo, that involved a scramble, an acrobatic adjustment. It showed high-level vision that was just a world away from Reed's forced, panicked throws. Manning's success wasn't about stats. It was about capitalizing on the momentum from the run game and managing the situation. He was asked to not lose the game with his arm, and then he delivered huge defining plays when he had to. Reed, on the other hand, tried to win the game with his arm when his team was already imploding, and that's why he forced those throws. Manning showed command. Reed showed desperation.
But Manning's success was often just masking how inefficient the offense was for long stretches. I mean, Texas had 41 total yards in the first quarter. Let's not forget that. So while he had a couple clutch throws, the offense was sputtering until A&M basically decided to quit playing organized defense. Relying on heroic backyard football isn't strategic superiority. That's just surviving chaos. Reed's problem was that his own excellent running, 71 yards, was wiped out by one bad decision under pressure. A lapse a quarterback of his caliber should have just avoided by throwing the ball away.
Surviving and adapting under pressure is a key part of strategic success, especially in a rivalry game. And on the other side of the ball, I think the Texas defense deserves a lot of credit for actively forcing those errors, not just waiting for A&M to implode. The Longhorns defense dictated the terms in that fourth quarter. They delivered the pressure that led to both of those interceptions. And they did this without their star linebacker, Anthony Hill Jr., who was out with a broken hand, holding a high-powered A&M offense that was averaging over 30 points a game to just 17. Well, that suggests excellent execution, not just Aggie mistakes.
I'll acknowledge the defensive intensity, sure, but A&M's lack of discipline constantly gave Texas a margin for error. Let's look at the sequence that led to the collapse. It started way before the fourth quarter interceptions. It began on special teams in the first quarter when Ethan Burke blocked that 35-yard field goal. That play kept the score 0-0 instead of 3-0 A&M, and that's a huge psychological boost for Texas, who couldn't move the ball at all early on. And then you have the critical false start penalty near midfield in the fourth quarter. It's 4th and 1. A conversion there could have completely swung the momentum back. The penalty pushes them to 4th and 6. They have to punt, and what does Texas do? They go 83 yards for a touchdown to go up 20-10. That penalty was just a profound lack of mental discipline. Texas capitalized, sure, but A&M handed them the opportunity on a silver platter.
And capitalizing
capitalizing on those mistakes is strategic execution. A disciplined team exploits the chaos their rival creates, and Texas converted every single opportunity they got in that second half, while A&M just dissolved. I mean, even before that 83-yard drive, A&M's previous drive was kept alive by a face mask penalty on Texas, which led to their touchdown. But Texas overcame their own penalty to completely outscore A&M in the final 2 quarters. They were just actively superior in managing the flow of the game.
But my core point stands. Texas A&M's inability to play to their standard when things got tough is what defines this game. Those 2 fourth-quarter interceptions weren't brilliant defensive plays. They were panic throws into coverage from a quarterback trying to save a sinking ship. The defense giving up 220 rushing yards, that alone cost them the game, regardless of who was calling plays for Texas. The Aggies were the architects of their own downfall. They lost their shot at the SEC championship through self-sabotage.
And my argument remains that it was Texas's strategic adjustments, specifically that unexpected, successful run game that stressed A&M's defense, along with clutch playmaking on both sides of the ball that allowed the Longhorns to impose their will. This was a proactive shift that secured their 3rd win over a top 14 opponent this season, and that gives them a compelling, evidence-based case for the CFP that's rooted in strategic dominance.
Well, both sides of this definitely highlight how intense and high stakes this renewed rivalry really is. The outcome was complex. It shows that winning a game like this is it's often a mix of exploiting your opponent's weaknesses and your opponent just failing to execute basic football.
Yeah, the question really lingers, and it will be fascinating to see how the playoff committee sees it. Is Texas's strategic dominance in that second half going to be rewarded, or will A&M's internal self-inflicted collapse be seen as the dominant narrative, maybe, diminishing the accomplishment a bit?
And that ambiguity is exactly why this discussion is so important. It shows you the deeper, more nuanced ways of looking at a game like the Lone Star Showdown, which is now thankfully cemented as an annual fixture in the SEC.